Hello. I just thought I would create a little visual tutorial for you on the stole mapping slash integrative mapping process. So I'm going to bring my video down to the page. So what can be helpful is to grab a visual diary that has blank pages. It could be any size. What I'm working with is one that's a Winsor and Newton visual diary. I think it's A4 pages, maybe 110 GSM. But I think part of this process is also just going with whatever kind of materials really call to you. So even when I was picking out initially a visual diary to work with, I was like, oh, why don't I want to get the one with the thicker pages? But I just had this instinct to go with one that had thinner pages. And then there was something that unfolded in the process that made it really clear why I chose that. So go to, if you don't have a visual diary, one, um, you might want to pick one up, or you can just use whatever you have. So everything I say in this tutorial, it's just suggestions, but I am really curious to see what happens when people start to use this process because I think everybody's going to have their own way and are going to have their own materials that they really like to use. But I'm sitting here with an A4 visual diary. And so to start a map, what we're going to do is we'll do a doodle in the center. And this could really be anything. So I have done things where I've just done some color in the center. And then as I've wanted to, maybe I've just added in some things on that color. I've done more kind of actual like proper drawings in the center. I really just kind of actually use the process to focus like, what actually wants to come through me right now? I might ask that question. For this tutorial, I'm going to do a little spiral. And I'm also just using a felt tip marker. Um, I have found I really enjoy using marker in this process or textures because I draw the doodle, but then I get this really cool thing where I get an impression on the other side that also gives some really like interesting information that I kind of couldn't have expected when I'm just looking at the front view. And then when you do the doodle, I mean, just kind of follow your instincts. I like to have like lots of pens available near me, and I'm going to add a little bit of silver onto this because it just feels right. So I think part of this process of creating the focal point is to really begin to ground and center our attention and get a little bit out of that thinking brain and more into that feeling, sense, instinctual, instinctual brain. Just adding that silver there. And then at any point, your doodle may feel complete. It may feel like it's not complete, but you can start to add what I call quadrants. So I'm going to draw some squiggly lines from that center doodle. This could be in any color that you like. Um, They could be straight lines. I often do squiggly lines because I feel like it just allows me to kind of open up a different part of my brain that is a little less linear. And you'll see in a moment when I use these quadrants to do some writing that it also kind of frees up the way the form my writing might take by having more of a kind of free form shape. But you can go with whatever you like. I often also like to just like date the map. That can be quite interesting to do with the idea being like this might be, if you really like this process, this might be something that you do regularly. So I've actually started a little bit of a habit of doing that. Since this might be a little excessive. I was pretty into it over the break, but I think that can be really helpful to have a date in the corner if that's something you'd like to do. And then in this next portion, essentially, it's like you can choose any quadrant and you can go in any direction, but you're gonna allow yourself to freely write anything into this quadrant. So we're just gonna write what I'm saying right now, but when I first started this process, in my first map, I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And it was just whatever was there. And sometimes I would just even write the same word over and over again, um, just almost to get into like a different flow. And then as the process evolved, I came across some really interesting information on this idea of keeping a notebook. So it's a little bit different than just a journal. So it's created by the author Joan Didion, and I will link a YouTube video that talks about the different steps and the different process. But essentially, there's sort of 10 ideas that she puts forward on this idea of keeping a personal notebook. One is this idea of personal memory. And I know that I'm just getting used to recording things, and this is going to be a little bit back to front for you. But you can even see it as I'm using this quadrant a little bit differently. So now it's like, oh, there's a little bit of a different idea that comes in. I'm going into a new quadrant with this. I'm writing in it. And yes, so this idea of keeping a notebook, it's like it's about helping connect to personal memory and identity, um, selective pieces of memory. So, for example, um, the other day I went for a walk and there was a very funny moment that occurred where I really wanted to. There were these beautifully colored seed pods, and I felt quite inspired, and I was going to pick them up and to create some art with them. And I was just so overzealous about this that I kind of wasn't taking in my surroundings. And as I was doing this, a walker passed me by and their eye fell on me, and I had this realization that I have become the weird person who is collecting sea ponds at the side of the trail. So in one of my notebooks, I actually created a little bit of an entry where I talked about that memory, but I kind of wrote it in almost sort of a literary fashion. So if you do have any interest in writing or creative writing, I'm also finding that this process is really rich and interesting in that you might have a little description of something in your life that you kind of create into like a little short story or a little short description so that it's almost like you're not just stating the facts of the situation, but you're almost seeing it through this more creative or literary eye. And then also in the process, there's an allowance for disjointed entries. So, uh, because I've really fallen in love with this process, I like to have one of these on the go kind of all of the time. So maybe in the morning, I'll just do a doodle. And then I know that if there's something else I kind of want to write at any point in the day, I can do that. And it could literally just be one line. Um, just last night, I had written some sort of really philosophical thing in one quadrant, and then in another quadrant, I'd seen a recipe for like a herby lemon yogurt sauce, and I wrote I wrote the recipe for that. So it's very like there doesn't have to be this like linear structure. It can be very like disjointed or like, I just really want to capture that thought that I was thinking, or I'm finding it really great because I tend to have lots of ideas that I can actually just note down my idea. Like I often use like a little gold pen, write idea, and then I know it's written down somewhere and I'm not going to lose it. You can also use this process, more like a journaling process. So for self-reflection, um, I'm gonna just see if I, let's see, how does that work? Yeah, I'm gonna practice my filming skills, but I know this is all back to front. But yeah, you can use this for self-reflection. So it can be like how you might use a journal. So if you like want to work with a question, like who am I becoming or what wants to be created through me now, you might just be with the question and you might just map on it. And something I like if you're really in a free flow of writing, you'll just find that you're just kind of moving around the page. So it's also like it's not that everything is in like how you'd be writing it on the normal page. It's in a linear fashion. You're actually kind of you're moving around the map. And there's something about uh journaling and self-reflection in that way where I have just found like it just goes that little bit deeper, like you're just able to maybe access some points of reflection or ideas that you might not have been able to otherwise. So another idea that is put forward on this idea of keeping a notebook, and these are all just suggestions or ideas. This process, if you like it, this becomes your process and you can use it however you want. I mean, I haven't actually done this, but you could, if you're just like, "Oh, I'm going to do a doodle," and then you actually just feel like, I don't want to, I'm not really feeling like I want to write about my experience, but there's these visual images that are coming up, and I'm putting those in the different quadrants. Or maybe you just feel like, I actually just feel like I just want some color here. So it's just kind of opening up the creative process. Like, I'll show you one I did the other day. Is like, I just started to like do these lines, which I hadn't done in the notebook before. And I don't have to make a rule about it that I always am going to do these lines, but I was like, oh, it's just so cool to start to see what wants to emerge and evolve as you do the process. So, uh, so the fifth idea put forward with this, using it as this personal, I call it a map, but a personal notebook, is writing as a private act. So it's this idea, I'm sharing this with you right now, but it's this idea that these maps are private. They're just for you. Um, so that is also enables the process to get freed up even more of what what do you really want to say? What do you really want to articulate? Um, and and it's a private piece of property. It's also a way of recording perception of reality. Uh, so, um, going back to that example of me picking up all of those seed pods and having that really funny moment. I perceived it as funny, so I actually wrote it in quite a funny way. But even as I think about this, I could have chosen to write it from the other person's perspective of what maybe they were feeling when they were witnessing this person at dusk, just grabbing handfuls of seed pods, seemingly for no reason. And that could be also its own sort of interesting kind of writing exercise. That could be kind of fun to record that. Um, it's also a way of recording emotional anchors. So if it does feel like something really significant happens, sometimes, with significant events, we might take like a photograph or something. But we also have these significant events in our life that are hugely important, and we might remember them or we may not. But it's actually about, you can use this process of writing it in such a way, or you could, it might be you just write a sentence, or you just write one word and you underline it, or you write it in a way that's like, when I look at it, um, that reminds me of that experience. Or you might even create like a whole map about one experience, or you might be mapping on something and there's a theme. So I've done that before, almost using it like a processing tool where you basically just keep mapping, and each time you form a new page, you'd be creating a new doodle. And what I found with that is like the doodle is kind of similar. Um, the color scheme is similar because I'm mapping about this particular theme. I'm actually trying to process through something. So basically kind of creating as many maps as is needed until it feels complete. Um, so I might say emotional anchors or emotional processing with that. Uh, and then the eighth idea that's put forward is that it could be for creative inspiration. So I'll just go back to my lemony yogurt herby sauce that I came across online. And it's like, had I not written it down, I felt like, yeah, I felt kind of creatively inspired by the idea of making it. And I know that had I just viewed the short little video and not taken the time to write it down, I probably wouldn't even be thinking about it right now, or let alone thinking about actually taking the action to make it. And I think that we can feel creatively inspired. It often happens very spontaneously, and then life happens, it gets in the way, and that whatever that inspiration it was la lost. So this is a way of actually where that those ideas are going to be, where that inspiration is going to be. It's going to be sitting amongst your maps. So it's recorded. Um, I also want to just say this isn't on the keeping a notebook idea, but I also love this process because I feel like it's a quiet little revolutionary act to just be offline. So a lot of the time when I'm creating a map, I actually make a decision to like turn off my laptop, put my phone away, and just be in this process. Um, and it feels different. It feels different for the nervous system. It feels really wholesome. And to be honest, I feel like as I do this more and more, it's reducing my desire even more to be online. Um, or I'm noticing how it actually feels to be in a really non-creative process. So that's just something to also keep in mind, that if you're if you find yourself online more than you'd like to be, this could be a really great kind of antidote for that. So another way that you might be using this process is preservation of memory. So a little bit like what I talked about. I mean, these might not even be like emotional anchors or processing so much, but it might just be like recording it in such a way, writing about an experience, um, to preserve it for yourself. When I looked into actually the essay Joan Didion wrote on keeping a notebook in a book called Slouching Towards Bethlehem, she actually talked about how when she reads through her notebook, she doesn't necessarily know if what she's written is true or not. So she would maybe sometimes write things because she was also a fiction author, both nonfiction and fiction. Sometimes she would maybe um change the season or things like they certain she'd take sort of some artistic um uh yeah she a license to through to record things. So it might be that you like to just preserve a memory exactly as it is, very factually, or you might like to take a little bit of artistic license with the way you're preserving things within the map. And then also a way that you might write in the map is just having a connection to the past. I feel like this is also really important for us as human beings in this time and age because there's just so much that happens in any given present moment, and we're just so inundated with more and more information. So I do really feel like this is a way of, um, yeah, recording what happens, and actually having a real embodied felt sense of your past, of your life. So that's another possibility. So those are some guidelines in terms of how the written portion of the map, how you might use it. But it's honestly, it can be used in any way that you feel is right for you. Also with the writing portion, just on a practical note, I always use these fine liners. Just years ago, I always just started to use it when I was writing anything because I just like the way it feels, and I don't have to really press hard to create a really good mark. It flows really nicely. So I would encourage you with anything that with this process is use materials that feel really good, that feel like they get you into kind of a flow state, like they feel like really easy to use. Um, as I said, I used felt tip pen for the doodle today, but you could do anything. So I've even thought about, I've got a little, I've got some seed pods right here, as if I prepared them before. I even thought about like somehow kind of finding a way to like paste a little bit of nature on a page, and then sometimes what I'll do, let's see if I can show you one that looks um, like sometimes this is like a little uh, it's like a leaf. I created this sort of, I don't know, I was just looking at a leaf and I drew it. But oftentimes if I do something that's kind of like this more organic shape, I'll put like a central circle around it, and then I'll create the lines. So that's definitely something you can try out. Here's another one where I kind of did a different kind of doodle, um, and I created a little kind of thing around it, and then I created the lines out of it. Um, but you could uh, use any kind of art medium that you actually are gravitating towards, or that you particularly like. For me, and this is kind of coming back around to when I first selected what kind of visual diary I was going to get. I was like, I don't understand why I'm going for the thinner pages. But what happened is what I had easy access to were these textures, these felt tip pens. And then I discovered like, it creates this amazing like imprint on the back. And it's like I don't even have to create another map. It's just there ready to go. And I was just kind of delighted by how that unfolded. So that may be something that you would choose to do as well, or you might feel really drawn to using crayons or pastels or paint or just having a pen. So maybe you just have a pen and you want to create a map and you just do like a quick doodle. That is completely fine. What I want to say is there are no rules. This is just a potential template that you could use for this process. So I hope you found that helpful. I hope you feel a little bit inspired to begin to create one of your own maps. And if you do try out this process, I'd love to hear how you go with it.